The night sky of Velar Prime had always been beautiful. 3 moons hung in the darkness, casting silver light across the crystal towers of the capital city. For 12,000 years, the Velari had looked up at those moons and felt safe. They had built a civilization of peace. They had created art that made other species weep with joy. They had discovered medicines that saved billions of lives across the galaxy. But tonight, Elder Counselor Rava did not see beauty when she looked at the sky. She saw death coming. The Velari were tall beings with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved with grace and spoke with soft voices. In all their long history, they had never fought a war. They believed that violence was the tool of lesser minds. They believed that reason and kindness could solve any problem. They were wrong. The Dren swarm had emerged from the dark edges of the galaxy 6 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from. Nobody knew what they wanted. They simply appeared and began consuming everything in their path. Entire worlds had gone silent. Billions of lives had been erased. The swarm did not negotiate. They did not make demands. They simply fed. And now they were coming to Velar Prime. Rava stood in the war chamber, though calling it that felt strange. The Velari had no war chambers. This room had been a place for diplomatic meetings, for signing treaties and celebrating alliances. Now it held maps showing the swarm's approach. Red dots covered the display, each one representing thousands of enemy ships. "The Torani fleet has just entered hyperspace," said Coordinator Tal. He was younger than Rava, but his face looked old with worry. "They are leaving." Rava closed her eyes. The Torani had been their allies for 300 years. The Velari had shared their medical knowledge freely. They had helped cure a plague that nearly destroyed the Torani homeworld. And now, when the Velari needed help, the Torani were running away. "What reason did they give?" Rava asked. "They said their forces are needed to protect their own borders. They said Velar Prime is too far from their territory to defend." Tal's voice was bitter. "They said they are sorry." Sorry, the word felt empty. 3 billion Velari lived on this world. Children played in the gardens. Families gathered for evening meals. Artists painted pictures of the 3 moons, and the Torani were sorry. "What about the Maikari?" Rava asked. "They promised to send their battle fleet." Tal shook his head slowly. "They sent a message 1 hour ago. They have decided that Velar Prime is indefensible. They believe any ship sent here will be lost. They have chosen to protect worlds they think they can save." Rava felt something cold spread through her chest. The Maikari were the greatest warriors in the Galactic Concordat. Their ships were powerful and their soldiers were brave. If anyone could stand against the swarm, it was them. But they had looked at the numbers and made a calculation. 3 billion Velari lives on one side, their own ships and soldiers on the other. The math did not favor the Velari. "The Alvani?" Rava asked, though she already knew the answer. "They stopped responding to our transmissions 2 days ago." Of course they had. The Alvani were traders and merchants. They calculated profit and loss better than anyone. There was no profit in dying for a doomed world. Rava walked to the large window that looked out over the city. Below her, lights glowed in thousands of homes. People were eating dinner. Children were being put to bed. Most of them did not know yet. Most of them still believed their allies would come to save them. "How long do we have?" Rava asked. 3 weeks, perhaps a little less." 3 weeks. 21 days until the swarm arrived. 21 days until the sky filled with enemy ships. 21 days until everything the Velari had built was destroyed. "We should tell the people," Tal said quietly. "They deserve to know." Rava nodded. Yes, they deserve to know. They deserve to spend their final days with their families. They deserve to say goodbye to the people they loved. They deserve truth, even if that truth was terrible. "Prepare a broadcast," Rava said. "I will speak to them tonight." She turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars she could see, the swarm was moving closer. Millions of ships filled with creatures that knew only hunger. They would come to Velar Prime and they would consume everything. The crystal towers would fall. The gardens would burn. The Velari, who had never raised a hand in violence, would be destroyed. And no one was coming to help. Rava thought about the Galactic Concordat. For centuries, the Velari had believed in it. They had given so much to the Alliance. Their healers had traveled to distant worlds to fight diseases. Their diplomats had ended conflicts between species. Their scientists had shared discoveries that benefited everyone. They had believed that the Concordat was a family, and families protected each other. But families, it seemed, only protected members who were useful. The Velari had no warships. They had no weapons. They could not help defend other worlds from the swarm, so they were being left behind like a sick animal that the herd abandons to predators. Tal came to stand beside her. "What do we do, Elder?" It was a question Rava could not answer. What could they do? They could not fight. They could not run. There were too many people and too few ships. They could not hide on a planet the swarm already knew about. There were no good options. There were no options at all. "We pray," Rava said finally. "We hold our families close. We tell them we love them, and we hope for a miracle." Tal was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "Do you believe in miracles, Elder?" Rava watched the 3 moons hanging in the sky. She thought about all the Velari who had looked up at those same moons over thousands of years. She thought about the children who would never grow up, the artists who would never finish their work, the lovers who would never grow old together. "No," she admitted, "but I have nothing else left to believe in." She turned away from the window and walked toward the broadcast room. In a few minutes, she would tell 3 billion people that they were going to die. She would tell parents that they could not save their children. She would tell the young that they would never see the future they dreamed of. It would be the hardest thing she had ever done. Behind her, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, the last Allied ships were fleeing to safety. And somewhere else, the swarm was coming closer, drawn by the scent of a world that had never learned to fight. The Velari were alone. And in 3 weeks they would be gone. Captain Doyon Park was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the signal came through. He was tired. His ship, the S Defiance, had been on patrol for 6 weeks. The crew was exhausted. Everyone wanted to go home. The Defiance was not a pretty ship. It was old, patched in a dozen places, and made strange noises when it changed direction. But Doyon loved it. He had commanded this ship for 8 years, and it had never let him down. Humans were still new to space. They had only joined the Galactic Concordat 47 years ago, after making first contact with the Makari. Most alien species thought humans were strange. They were loud. They laughed too much. They made art about violence and war. They ate food that other species considered poison. They lived short lives but packed them full of noise and chaos. The older species tolerated humans but did not respect them. To beings who lived for thousands of years, humans were like children, interesting but not important. Doyon did not care what the aliens thought. He was a captain in the Earth System's fleet. He had a job to do, and he did it well. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hana Yoon from the communications station, "I am picking up a distress signal. It is broadcasting on all frequencies." Hana was young, barely 25, with short black hair and sharp eyes. She was the best communications officer Doyon had ever worked with. She could pull signals out of static that no one else could hear. "Put it on speaker," Doyon said. The voice that filled the bridge was soft and filled with grief. It spoke in the common galactic language, but the accent was unfamiliar. "This is Velar Prime calling any ship that can hear us. The Galactic Concordat has abandoned us. The Dren swarm will arrive in 19 days. We have 3 billion people and no way to defend them. Please, if anyone can help us, please respond. We are begging you." The message repeated. Doyon listened to it 3 times. Each time, the sadness in the voice cut deeper. Velar Prime, said Commander Tiho Shin, the executive officer. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a calm voice. I have heard of them. They are healers and scholars. They have no military. The Concordat abandoned them, Hana asked, just like that. I will check. Tiho worked at his console for a moment. His face grew darker as he read. Yes, the Concordat has marked Velar Prime as a lost cause. All Allied ships have been ordered to withdraw. Command says we are not to engage the swarm in that sector. Do-Yun set down his coffee cup. He looked at the star map on the main screen. Velar Prime was 3 days away at maximum speed. The swarm was 19 days from the planet. If the Defiance went there, they would arrive with time to spare. But what could one ship do against the swarm? How many swarm ships? Do-Yun asked. Reports say at least 4,000, sir, maybe more. 4,000 ships. The Defiance had good weapons, but it was just one small vessel. Going to Velar Prime would be suicide. Do-Yun stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars burned in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, 3 billion people were waiting to die. They had called for help and the galaxy had ignored them. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old, with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn nature. What would he want someone to do if she was on a planet that the galaxy had abandoned? Hana, Do-Yun said quietly. Open a channel to all human ships in this sector. Private frequency, no Concordat monitors. Hana looked surprised but obeyed. Channel open, sir. Do-Yun took a breath. This is Captain Park of the S Defiance. I know you all heard that distress signal. I know what command has ordered. But I am not going to sit here while 3 billion innocent people die because the Concordat decided they are not worth saving. I am taking my ship to Velar Prime. I am not ordering anyone to follow me. But if you want to do something that matters, if you want to prove that humans are more than what the galaxy thinks we are, then follow my signal. Park out. He cut the channel and turned to his crew. They were all staring at him. Some looked scared. Some looked excited. None of them looked away. You heard me, Do-Yun said. We are going to Velar Prime. Anyone who wants to leave can take an escape pod at the next station. I will not force anyone to come with me. Tiho stepped forward. Sir, this is against direct orders. If we do this, we might never be able to return to Earth. I know. The swarm has destroyed entire fleets. We have one ship. I know that too. Tiho was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, tired smile. I did not join the fleet to run away from fights. Set course for Velar Prime. Hana was already working at her console. Sir, I am receiving responses from other ships. Her eyes went wide. The S Resilience is changing course to join us. So is the S Horizon, the S Courage, the S. She stopped counting and looked up with tears in her eyes. 12 ships, sir. 12 ships are coming with us. Do-Yun felt something warm spread through his chest. 12 ships. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Who is commanding the Resilience? He asked. Commander Minji Beek, sir. Do-Yun knew Minji. She was tough, smart, and absolutely fearless. If anyone could help him pull off the impossible, it was her. Get her on a private channel. A moment later, Minji's face appeared on the screen. She was about 40, with a scar across her chin and eyes that had seen too much death. But she was smiling. Park, she said, I always knew you were crazy. Now you have proof. Are you sure about this? Do-Yun asked. We could all die out there. Minji laughed. It was not a happy sound, but it was real. We could die anywhere, at least this way it means something. My crew is with me. What is the plan? Do-Yun looked at the star map again. 12 ships against 4,000. 800 human soldiers against an enemy that had consumed entire worlds. It was madness. But sometimes madness was the only sane response. We go to Velar Prime, Do-Yun said. We teach them how to fight. We build defenses. We make the swarm pay for every meter of ground in blood. and we give those 3 billion people a chance." "A chance," Minji repeated, "not a guarantee." "No, but a chance is more than they have right now. A chance is more than the Concordat gave them." Minji nodded slowly. "Then let us give them hell. See you at Velar Prime, Captain." The screen went dark. Doyun turned to his crew. "Set course," he said. "Maximum speed." The S-Defiance turned toward Velar Prime, and 11 other ships followed. They were small, old, and outnumbered beyond reason. They were disobeying orders and flying toward almost certain death. But they were human, and humans did not leave people behind. The people of Velar Prime had stopped hopping. After Elder Counselor Rava's broadcast, a heavy silence had fallen over the planet. Families gathered in their homes. Temples filled with people praying to gods who did not answer. Some wrote letters to loved ones who would never read them. Others simply held each other and waited for the end. Coordinator Tal had not slept in 3 days. He stood in the defense center, watching screens that showed nothing but empty space. The planetary shields were running at maximum power, but everyone knew they would only delay the swarm by a few hours. There was nothing else to do but wait. A young technician named Vila sat at the sensor station. She had only been working in the defense center for a month. She had planned to become a scientist, to study the stars and unlock the secrets of the universe. Now she would never get that chance. "Coordinator," Vila said suddenly. Her voice was strange, confused, and scared. "I am detecting ships." Tal felt his heart stop. "The swarm already." "No, sir, the signatures are different. These are. I do not recognize them." Tal rushed to her station and looked at the screen. 12 blips of light were approaching Velar Prime. They were coming fast, much faster than the swarm moved. Their energy signatures were small compared to Concordat ships. "Can you identify them?" Tal asked. Vila worked at her console. Her hands were shaking. "Running the signatures through the database now." She paused. Her eyes went wide. "They are human ships, sir." Human? Tal had heard of humans, but he had never met one. They were newcomers to the galaxy, a young species that most others ignored. Why would they come here? Before he could think further, a transmission came through. A male voice, speaking the common galactic language with a strange accent. "This is Captain Park of the Earth Systems Fleet. We received your distress call. We are not leaving." Tal stared at the screen in shock. He looked at Vila, who looked just as confused as he felt. Neither of them knew what to say. "Patch this through to Elder Counselor Rava," Tal finally managed. "Immediately." Minutes later, Rava's voice came through the communication system. She sounded like she had been crying. "This is Elder Counselor Rava of Velar Prime. Who are you?" "Captain Doyun Park, ma'am, Earth Systems Fleet. We brought 12 ships and about 800 soldiers. We are here to help." There was a long silence. When Rava spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion. "Captain, there are thousands of swarm vessels coming. You have 12 ships. You will die." Another voice came through, female, sharp, confident. "With respect, Elder, that is our choice to make. I am Commander Minji Beak of the S Resilience. Now, do you have anyone who can hold a weapon? We have 2 weeks to teach them how to fight." Tal felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to realize what it was. Hope. For the first time in days, he felt hope. The 12 human ships landed in the fields outside the capital city. The Velari gathered to watch, thousands of them crowding the streets and rooftops. They had never seen humans before. They did not know what to expect. The ships were not impressive. They were small, battered, covered in patches and repairs. They looked like they might fall apart at any moment. But when the doors opened and the humans walked out, something changed. Captain Doyun Park was the first to step onto Velari soil. He was shorter than the Velari, with dark hair and tired eyes. His uniform was wrinkled from the long journey. He did not look like a hero from the old stories. He looked like an ordinary man who had made an extraordinary choice. Behind him came hundreds of human soldiers, men and women of all ages. Some were young, barely adults. Others had gray hair and lined faces. They carried weapons and equipment, but they also carried something else, a look in their eyes that the Velari had never seen before. It was determination. It was refusal. It was the look of people who had decided not to give up. Elder Counselor Rava walked forward to meet them. She moved slowly, still not quite believing what she was seeing. When she stood before Captain Park, she did not know what to say. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why did you come?" Do-yun looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked past her at the thousands of Velari watching from the streets. Children held their parents' hands. Elderly people leaned on their families for support. Artists, healers, teachers, farmers, ordinary people who had never asked for war. "Because someone had to," Do-yun said simply, "and no one else would." Rava felt tears run down her face. She had prepared herself for death. She had prepared her people for the end. And now these strange, small beings had crossed the stars to stand beside them. "You cannot win," she said. "You know that." Do-yun smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Maybe not, but we can make them pay for every step. We can give your people a chance. And honestly, Elder, humans are not very good at accepting the impossible." Commander Minji Beak stepped forward. She was shorter than Do-yun, with a scar on her chin and eyes like steel. "We do not have time for speeches. The swarm will be here in 16 days. We need to start preparing now." "Preparing for what?" Tal asked. "We have no military, we have never fought." Minji looked at him. Her expression was not cruel, but it was hard. "Then we will build one. We will train your people. We will set up defenses. We will turn this beautiful planet into the worst nightmare the swarm has ever seen." She paused. "Can your people learn to fight?" Tal thought about the Velari. They were peaceful. They were gentle. They had never harmed another living being. Could they become warriors in 2 weeks? He did not know. But looking at the humans standing before him, looking at the hope in the eyes of the Velari around them, he knew they had to try. "We can learn," he said. Minji nodded. "Good, then let us get to work." The humans did not waste time. Within hours, they had set up command centers and started mapping the planet's defenses. Lieutenant Jiho Kwon, a ground tactics specialist, began organizing the Velari into groups. Sergeant Suji Han, a combat medic, started training Velari healers in battlefield medicine. Chief Engineer Minyu Ryu looked at the Velari civilian ships and started making plans to turn them into something dangerous. The Velari watched in amazement. These humans moved with purpose and energy. They did not complain about the impossible odds. They did not despair about the coming battle. They simply worked, hour after hour, preparing for a fight that everyone said they could not win. Late that night, Rava found Captain Park standing alone on a hill overlooking the city. The 3 moons cast silver light across his face. He looked exhausted but at peace. "Captain," Rava said quietly, "I must ask you something." "Yes." "You came here knowing you will probably die. Your people came knowing the same thing. Why? The Velari are strangers to you. We are not your species, not your family, not your responsibility. Why throw away your lives for us?" Do-yun was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "On Earth we have a saying, no man is an island. It means that none of us exist alone. What happens to others affects us too." He turned to face her. "The galaxy decided your people were acceptable losses. They calculated the numbers and walked away. But humans are not very good at that kind of math. We see 3 billion people who deserve to live, and we cannot just leave them." Rava did not understand completely, but she felt the truth of his words. "You are strange beings, you humans." Do-yun laughed softly. "Yes, we get that a lot." He looked back at the city. "Get some rest, Elder. Tomorrow we start building the defense of Velar Prime, and it is going to be hard." Rava nodded and walked away. Behind her, the human captain stood watching over a world that was not his home, preparing to die for people he had never met. The Velari were no longer alone. The first day of training was a disaster. The Velari had never held weapons before. They did not understand violence. When Lieutenant Jiho Kwon showed them how to fire a rifle, many of them refused to even touch it. Some started crying. Others simply walked away, unable to process what they were being asked to do. Jiho did not yell at them. He did not get angry. He had expected this. That evening, he gathered a group of Velari volunteers in a large hall. There were about 200 of them, young and old, male and female. They looked scared and confused. Many still had tears in their eyes. Jiho stood before them. He was not a tall man, but he had a presence that made people listen. He had fought in 3 wars. He had seen friends die. He knew what violence cost, and he knew why it was sometimes necessary. "I know this is hard," he said. His voice was calm and gentle. "You have spent your whole lives believing that violence is wrong. Your culture taught you that peace is the highest goal, and that is beautiful. It truly is." He paused and looked around the room. Every eye was on him. "But here is the truth. The swarm is coming. They do not care about your culture. They do not care about your beliefs. They will come here and they will kill everyone. Your parents, your children, your friends. They will not stop because you ask nicely. They will not leave because you refuse to fight." A young Velari woman raised her hand. Her name was Myra, and she had been a teacher before all this started. "Then what can we do? We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight." Jiho walked toward her. "You do not need to become warriors. You do not need to become killers. You just need to become people who protect their families. There is a difference." He turned to face the whole group again. "I am not asking you to enjoy fighting. I am not asking you to become violent creatures. I am asking you to pick up a weapon and stand between the people you love and the monsters that want to hurt them. That is all." The room was silent. Then slowly, an elderly Velari man stood up. His name was Rowan, and he had been a healer for 60 years. His hands were old and gentle, hands that had saved thousands of lives. "Show us," Rowan said quietly. "Show us how to protect our families." Jiho nodded. "That is all I needed to hear." In another part of the city, Sergeant Suji Han was training Velari healers in battlefield medicine. It was brutal work. The Velari were excellent doctors, but they had never dealt with combat injuries. They had never seen bodies torn apart by weapons. Suji did not spare them the truth. She showed them pictures of injuries they might see. She taught them how to stop bleeding, how to treat burns, how to keep someone alive long enough to reach a medical center. Many of the Velari healers vomited. Some fainted, but they kept learning. One healer, a middle-aged woman named Kira, worked 18 hours without rest. When Suji finally ordered her to take a break, Kira refused. "Every hour I spend resting is an hour I am not learning," Kira said. "And everything I do not learn might cost someone their life." Suji looked at her with new respect. These Velari might not know how to fight, but they knew how to care. And sometimes that was even more important. "All right," Suji said. "Let me show you how to treat radiation burns." Chief Engineer Minyu Ryu was turning civilian transport ships into weapons. It was messy, dangerous work. The Velari ships were not designed for combat. Their hulls were thin, their engines were slow, and they had no weapon systems at all. But Minyu was creative. He pulled weapons from the human ships and mounted them on Velari vessels. He reinforced hulls with whatever metal he could find. He rebuilt engines to squeeze out a little more speed. The results were ugly, patchwork ships that looked like they might fall apart at any moment. A Velari engineer named Paul watched him work with amazement. "Will these actually fly in combat?" Minyu grinned. His face was covered in grease and his hands were bleeding from working with sharp metal. "Probably, maybe, we will find out." "That is not very reassuring." "I know, but it is the best we have." Minyu put down his tools and looked at the ship he was working on. Listen, these ships are not going to win any beauty contests. They are not going to outrun swarm fighters or outshoot swarm carriers. But they will fly and they will shoot, and that is more than you had yesterday. Paul nodded slowly. What can I do to help? Minyu handed him a welding tool. Can you weld? No. Then I will teach you. We have 3 days to turn 50 transports into gunships. We need every hand we can get. The training continued around the clock. Humans and Velari worked side by side, sleeping only when they collapsed from exhaustion. Slowly, the Velari began to change. Lieutenant Hana Yoon was setting up communication networks when she noticed something. The Velari who had cried on the first day were now holding weapons without flinching. The healers who had fainted at the sight of blood were now calmly learning to treat terrible injuries. The engineers who had never built anything dangerous were now welding armor onto ships. They are learning fast, Hana said to Commander Tiho Shin. Tiho nodded. They had to. When the choice is learn or die, people learn. Commander Minji Beek was planning the defense strategy with Captain Do-Yun Park and Coordinator Tal. They had maps of Velar Prime spread across a large table, covered in marks and notes. We cannot win in space, Minji said bluntly. 12 ships against 4,000. The math is impossible. Then what do? Tal asked. We make them fight on the ground. Do-Yun pointed at the map. We use the planetary shields to force them to land troops. We choose where they land. We build defensive positions in these mountain valleys. We make them come to us. Minji continued. The swarm wins by overwhelming enemies with numbers, but numbers do not help in narrow valleys and underground tunnels. We take away their advantage and create our own. Tal studied the map. You want to turn our planet into a trap. Exactly. Do-Yun's eyes were hard. Every valley a kill zone, every tunnel a choke point. They will take Velar Prime, but we will make sure they bleed for every meter. Can we really hurt them? Tal asked. Enough to make a difference. Minji and Do-Yun exchanged looks. There was no easy answer. Honestly, Do-Yun said, we do not know. The swarm has never faced a defense like this before. They have never met humans before. Maybe they will crush us in a day, or maybe we will hurt them so badly that they think twice before attacking the next planet. Hope, Tal said quietly. You are giving us hope. It is all we have to give. On the 10th day, something unexpected happened. A young Velari man named Bomb walked up to Lieutenant Jiho during training. Bomb had been one of the worst students, clumsy, scared, unable to aim his weapon properly. But today something was different. Bomb stood straighter, his eyes were clearer. Lieutenant, Bomb said, I want to volunteer for the front line. Jiho looked at him carefully. The front line will be the most dangerous place. You could die in the first hour. I know, Bomb took a breath. My little sister is 7 years old. She likes to draw pictures of the 3 moons if the swarm reaches her. He could not finish the sentence. I need to be between her and them. I need to give her a chance. Jiho felt something twist in his heart. He thought about his own sister back on Earth, who had cried when he told her he was going to Velar Prime. All right, Jiho said. You are on the front line, but you need more training. Come with me. As they walked away, Jiho realized something. The Velari were not becoming warriors because humans taught them to fight. They were becoming warriors because they had something worth fighting for. And that was something no training could create. The days passed too quickly. The swarm grew closer. The defense preparations continued. Humans and Velari worked together, slept together, ate together. They became something neither group had expected, a family. On the last night before the swarm arrived, Elder Counselor Rava found Captain Do-Yun on the same hill where they had talked before. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he agreed. Are we ready? Do-Yun looked at the city below, at the defensive positions in the hills, at the strange, ugly gunships sitting in the fields. He thought about the Velari who had learned to fight, the humans who had come to die, and the 3 billion people they were all trying to save. "No," he said honestly, "but we are as ready as we can be, and sometimes that has to be enough." The swarm arrived at dawn. At first, it looked like a dark cloud spreading across the sky. Then the cloud got closer, and everyone could see what it really was: thousands of ships, so many that they blocked out the sun. The swarm moved like a living thing, writhing and shifting as it approached Velar Prime. Captain Do-Yun Park stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the enemy approach. His crew was quiet. There was nothing left to say. They all knew they were probably going to die today. A transmission came through from the swarm. It was a voice unlike anything Do-Yun had heard, cold, hollow, like many voices speaking at once. "Surrender and be consumed quickly. Resist and suffer." Commander Minjibeek's voice came through from the Resilience. "Captain, orders." Do-Yun smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was real. He opened a channel to all frequencies: human, Velari, and swarm. "This is Captain Park of the Earth System's fleet. You want Velar Prime. Come and take it." He cut the transmission. "All ships engage." The 12 human ships flew straight at the swarm. They knew they could not win in space, but they could buy time. Time for the planetary shields to activate, time for the ground defenders to prepare, time for the civilians to reach the underground shelters. The Defiance fired everything it had. Missiles streaked toward swarm carriers. Energy weapons burned through enemy fighters. Around him, the other human ships did the same, creating a wall of fire between the swarm and Velar Prime. Lieutenant Hana Yoon worked frantically at her station, coordinating the human fleet. She directed fire, tracked enemy movements, and kept the communication lines open. She had not slept in 36 hours, but her hands were steady. "Horizon is taking heavy damage," she reported. "Courage has lost engines. Resilience is falling back." One by one, the human ships were destroyed. The S-Horizon exploded in a ball of fire, taking a swarm carrier with it. The S-Courage rammed into a cluster of enemy ships, its captain choosing death over surrender. On the 4th day, only 5 human ships remained. Commander Tiho Shin came to Do-Yun with a damage report. His face was covered in burns, and his arm was bandaged. "Sir, we cannot hold them much longer. They are breaking through." "I know." Do-Yun looked at the tactical display. The swarm had lost hundreds of ships, but they still had thousands more. It was not enough. "Order all remaining ships to fall back to the planet. We make our stand on the ground." The surviving human ships descended through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and fire. Below them, the ground battle had already begun. Lieutenant Jiho Kwon was in the Eastern Valley, commanding a mixed force of humans and Velari. The swarm creatures were terrible to look at, massive insect-like beings with blades for arms and teeth that could tear through metal. They came in waves, climbing over their own dead to reach the defenders. But the defenders did not run. The young Velari man named Bomb stood on the front line, firing his weapon with steady hands. He thought about his little sister in the shelter below. He thought about her drawings of the 3 moons. Every shot he fired was for her. Beside him, Velari, who had never held weapons 2 weeks ago, fought like veterans. They were scared, everyone was scared, but they did not retreat. The humans had taught them well. "Hold the line," Jiho shouted. "Make them pay." In the western mountains, Sergeant Suji Han was running a field hospital. The wounded came in waves, humans and Velari, torn apart by swarm weapons. Suji worked without rest, stitching wounds, stopping bleeding, saving lives. A young Velari healer named Kira worked beside her. Kira's hands were covered in blood, her face pale with exhaustion, but she kept working. "I cannot stop the bleeding," Kira said, her voice shaking. "He is going to die." Suji looked at the patient, a human soldier with a massive wound in his chest. There was nothing they could do. Some wounds were too big. "Make him comfortable," Suji said quietly. "Hold his hand. Let him know he is not alone." Kira nodded. She took the soldier's hand and spoke to him softly until he was gone. Then she wiped her eyes and moved to the next patient. That was war, death and survival side by side. The battle raged for 9 days. On the 5th day, Lieutenant Hana Yoon died. Her ship had been crippled, but she stayed at her post, coordinating the evacuation of civilians from the northern sector. When the ship finally broke apart, she was still transmitting, still helping until the very end. On the 6th day, Chief Engineer Minyu Ryu led a suicide mission into a swarm landing zone. He drove a transport ship loaded with explosives directly into the enemy command structure. The explosion killed thousands of swarm creatures and destroyed their coordination in that sector. Minyu did not survive. On the 7th day, the swarm broke through the eastern defenses. Lieutenant Jiho Kwon led a counterattack that pushed them back. He took a blade through the chest but kept fighting until his soldiers dragged him to safety. He survived, barely. Every day, more humans and Velari died. Every day, the survivors kept fighting. On the 9th day, something changed. The swarm stopped advancing. Commander Minji Beek, who had taken command after Doyun was wounded, noticed it first. The enemy ships were pulling back. The ground creatures were retreating to their landing zones. "What is happening?" Coordinator Tal asked. Minji watched the tactical display with disbelief. "They are leaving." "Leaving why?" A transmission came through from the swarm, the same cold, hollow voice as before. "This world is not worth the cost. We will find easier prey." Then the swarm turned and flew away, disappearing into the darkness between the stars. The defenders stood in silence, unable to believe what had just happened. They had won. Against all odds, against every calculation, they had won. Not because they destroyed the swarm. The enemy still had thousands of ships, still had millions of creatures, but they had made Velar Prime so expensive to take that the swarm decided it was not worth the effort. Humans called this kind of victory a Pyrrhic defense, a defense that cost so much that even the enemy reconsidered, and the humans had been experts at it for thousands of years. The cost was terrible. Of the 12 human ships, only 3 remained. Of the 800 human soldiers who came to Velar Prime, only 214 survived. The Velari had lost hundreds of thousands of defenders. But 3 billion people were alive. 3 billion people who would have been consumed by the swarm. 3 billion people who were only alive because 12 ships had answered a call for help. 2 weeks later, Elder Counselor Rava stood before the Galactic Concordat Council. Behind her stood the surviving human captains, Doyun Park, Minji Beek, and a handful of others. They were bandaged and tired, but they held their heads high. The Torani ambassador spoke first. "Your soldiers disobeyed Concordat orders. They interfered in a situation marked as a lost cause. They should be punished." Admiral Yuri Choi stepped forward. She was old and gray, but her eyes were sharp. She commanded Earth's expeditionary forces, and she had come all the way from Earth for this moment. "You are correct," Yuri said calmly. "My people disobeyed orders. They flew into a battle they could not win. They died in a war that was not their responsibility." She paused and looked around the council chamber. Every alien species was represented: the Torani, the Makari, the Alvani, and dozens more. All of them had abandoned Velar Prime. All of them had decided that 3 billion lives were not worth saving. "But here is what they also did," Yuri continued. "They saved 3 billion people. They proved that some of us still believe in protecting the weak. They showed the swarm that there are species in this galaxy who will fight, even when the odds are impossible." She stepped closer to the Torani ambassador. "You want to punish them? Go ahead. But know this, Every human who hears that story will remember what you did. They will remember that you abandoned innocent people and then tried to punish the ones who saved them. And the next time one of you sends a distress call, you had better hope we are still feeling generous." The council was silent. The Torani ambassador looked away. The matter was never mentioned again. In the years that followed, the Velari and humans became the closest allies in the galaxy. The Velari shared their medical knowledge, their art, their philosophy. The humans taught them how to defend themselves, how to stand up against bullies, how to fight for what they believed in. And across the galaxy, species began to whisper about the strange, short-lived creatures called humans. They whispered about 12 ships that had answered a call for help when everyone else ran away. They whispered about soldiers who died for people they had never met. Some called humans reckless, some called them stupid, some called them dangerous. But no one ever called them cowards. And whenever a species faced impossible odds, whenever they were abandoned by allies and left to die, they always asked the same question. What would the humans do? The answer was always the same. The humans would fight.